Okay, welcome to the video. SIG Guy here. In this video, I'm going to show you how to install the Ramm Tactical Leverage Trigger in your SIG Sauer P365 using just a few simple tools. It does install a little bit different than what we're used to, but it's still a relatively easy install, so let's get started. So let's talk about the kits really quick. They do come in several different options. You have your California version 365s and your non-California version 365s with and without safeties, okay? So several different kits to choose from. These are available on sigguy.com as well. So make sure when you're ordering specific for your 365, whether you have a California one or a non-California one. And then if you got a non-California one, whether it's with or without manual safety, okay? So once you have your trigger kit, just a couple tools, make it easier to do. On the website, sigguy.com, I sell many different tool kits. This one is specific for the 365. Comes with a punch, a 90-degree pick, and a pin alignment tool, okay? If you have several different SIG pistols, like a 320 and a classic, many different models, there is a deluxe kit that basically takes the one tool from every kit that I offer, combines them into the deluxe kit. That way all the pistol models are covered, okay? But if you just have a 320, just get the 320 kit. If you have a 365, get a 365 kit. It's entirely up to you. Again, all available on sigguy.com. So now that we have our tools, we have our trigger kit, and we have our FCU ready to go, let's show you how to get this installed. Okay, so our first step basically is a complete disassembly of the 365 because in the kit we have sear springs, a modified sear, all kinds of parts that really just go down to the bare bones of the disassembly, okay? So we're going to start disassembling this. The first thing I want to do is remove my manual safety. So those people with a manual safety, this is for you, obviously, and if you don't have a manual safety, then you can just skip forward a little bit. So with the manual safety here, we have a little bit of detent right here. Okay, you can see it clicking in and out of that notch. I shouldn't tell you this, but pro tip, this is spring-loaded detent, so if you don't cover it with your finger, it's going to go flying across the room. A lot of times when I'm first disassembling things, I'll do it like this inside a Ziploc bag. That way if that thing takes off, it's just going to get captured by the bag, and you don't risk losing it. Now, if you do lose it, good news, I sell all factory parts basically for everything on this FCU, available again on sigguy.com under the small parts, 365 small parts page. The manual safety detent, the detent spring, and the manual safety lever are the three parts that make up your manual safety, okay? So if you do happen to lose it, no big deal. It's just going to cost you a little bit to get a new one. So what I do is I kind of push this detent in with my finger. See how it's spring loaded? Okay. This little detent right here. This little pin that runs in this two notches. That's what makes the clicking sound. Okay. So we're just going to push that in a little bit. I'm going to rotate my manual safety lever here clockwise so that little detent can get out of that notch. Okay. And like I said, I'm going to cover it with my finger as I do this. And I'm going to slowly release the pressure. Okay. You can see the little detent there. So we can pull that right out of there so we don't lose that. Here's another pro tip. Ziploc bags, man, they're like life. It's a best friend sometimes. I put everything in a Ziploc bag, especially when we're we're going to be using the Ramm Tactical, some of the parts from this and some factory ones, and we really don't want to get them mixed up, okay? So also inside that little lever is this little spring, okay? So just tapping it like that so it would fall out. We're going to take that little detent spring and put that in this bag as well. There, now we're not going to lose that stuff right there. You can even label it factory, like I do in one of the bags around here that it came from. Anyway, so we're going to remove that lever now, and this just takes a little bit of a finagling. It's got to kind of rotate and come up out of that notch. So it does move side to side. See that? So if it's not to the left, it's not going to come up out of there. It's got to, you got to push it to the left, and then we're going to rotate it up and out of there. And a lot of times if we pull our trigger a little bit, we can get more room in between the notch that this thing lives in. Or you can just kind of wiggle it up and out of there. The only real catch on this thing is this little leg here. I don't want to get too close to the camera because this phone will switch lenses. It makes the video look stupid, but here's this little leg here that kind of goes in and under this cross member here, we'll call it. So you got to kind of fish it up and around that, okay? So again, if you pull the trigger a little bit, you can see the trigger bar kind of gets out of the way. Things move around a little bit, makes a little bit more room to come out of there. But that's how we remove our manual safety, and I'm going to stick that right in the bag as well so we don't lose that. The manual safety, we're going to have to use the one in the Ramm Tactical Kit because that's modified. The detent and the spring we're going to reuse. If you don't have a spring and a detent and you want to install the manual safety, you're going to need to get those two parts. That's the manual safety detent spring part number. And then here is our manual safety detent. Okay. Awful big bag. SIG's carbon footprint is pretty huge with these bags. But there's the two parts right there. We have plenty of those in stock. Those are, people buy those all the time, all day, every day. So we make sure we got plenty of those. But that's how we remove our manual safety. For those of you who don't have a manual safety, you're going to start from here and continue forward. Okay, so next we're going to remove our trigger bar spring. Basically, it just goes through our trigger bar. The other end hooks here on that little notch on our FCU. So the needle nose pliers or whatever you want to use, that's what the pick's in the kit for. Just going to put that underneath the trigger bar, unhook it just like that, rotate it to the side, and let that fall out. We're going to put that in our bag as well because the Ramm Tactical one comes with a new trigger bar spring. So our trigger bar is all floating and everything, which is fine. So now we can just let our disconnector, we can move our trigger bar down. This is our disconnector. Yours may be silver. The newer ones are black. We'll just let that fall out. We're going to reuse that. Put that right here. And then we have two holes here. Okay. We got our safety lever pivot pin and the top one's for your sear. Okay, so we can't see that one yet. So we're going to take our pin alignment tool or a punch or whatever you got. You can see it fits perfect in that hole. And it's going to push out our safety lever pivot pin. Okay, we're going to put that here. We're going to reuse that. So once we pull our pin alignment tool out, our safety lever is going to fall out right there. This is the piece you hear flopping around inside your 365 if you're one of those guys that shakes it and then asks, what's that noise? So now things are starting to just kind of fall off here. So we got our takedown safety lever bar right there that just fell off. This hooks right around the back side of the sear, and then this part here goes on your takedown lever. Okay, so we'll just let that fall off. We're going to reuse that. We can actually rotate our takedown lever to about the 7 o'clock position and pull that straight out. Okay, so it's got to be in the 7 o'clock position for it to come out. So if it doesn't come right out, just keep kind of moving around until it comes out. We're going to put that right there. Our slide catch, if you're lucky, it'll stay in place. We don't really need to remove that, okay? I'm going to remove it just in case yours does fall out. That way this video will cover everything. So say it fell out. just like that. I was going to say the spring doesn't usually fall out, but it did. So there's our little spring. There's our slide catch. So I'll show you how to put that back together. Make sure you don't lose your little spring there, okay? It's usually around this little post right here. It usually stays in there. It's the first time it's actually fell out. But we'll put that right there. That way we can show you how to put that in there. So now we got our trigger bar and our trigger. Basically, the punch that comes in the 365 disassembly and reassembly kit. It fits in the center of most triggers. Not all triggers, though. Okay, because some of these guys, they machine these holes a lot smaller. And then the California one is very small. And it's got actually a different pivot pin as well. So this, you can use a paper clip, or I have a T-pin up here that I use on a lot of stuff. Okay, like your mag releases and stuff. T-pin works great. So we'll knock that pivot pin out. It only comes out one way. So we're going to go from this side here out the slide catch stop, or slide catch side. And then now our trigger will actually pivot more than it used to. So we can actually pull our trigger back, which brings the front forward. And we can unhook our trigger bar, which kind of just goes in behind the trigger on a post and uses this oblong hole to get access to that pin on the backside of our trigger. So we're just kind of rotate this up and out. We're going to reuse that as well. So we'll set that here. Trigger should fall out. Sometimes they make you look stupid. And they don't want to come out. Come on, right there. So there's our trigger. The Ramm Tactical obviously comes with a new trigger. So we're going to set that aside over here. The only other thing we have left in here is our sear and our sear spring. So the top hole now, where our disconnector came out, we have access to that now. You can use the pin alignment tool to basically, this is going to have a little bit of tension on it, okay? So we're going to push that pivot pin out. Set that aside. We're going to reuse that. And then we pull our alignment pin out of there. Our sear and our sear spring will fall out just like that. All right, so we are pretty much completely disassembled. There's only one other thing here, and I want to bring it up because it might fall out and you don't even notice it fall out. But it's this little spring here. It's basically for our receiver pin. It retains it, okay? Your receiver pin has notches on each end, so this can go in either way, but only one side is retained by this little spring here, okay? So that spring, I'll just show you how to take it off and put it back on really quick. Basically kind of roll it off the top, and it kind of, it's like hinges around, and then I pull it off, and that's what it looks like. It's almost a complete circle, but it's flat on one side. Okay, that flat part kind of goes inside the hole there. It's got a notch in the bottom, and you can see it inside the hole, and that's what clicks into one of the grooves on your receiver pin. Okay, so if you do lose that spring, or if it's just weak and your receiver pin, you got to keep fiddling with that every now and then to make sure it's locked in there. Two different options. I'm a SIG master accessory dealer, so I have tons of these parts all in stock. Virtually every single part available for most of the pistols out there. So this is the 365 receiver pin. It comes with a brand new pin, and it comes with two of those retaining springs. Okay, if you don't want to buy a whole new kit, and maybe you have an aftermarket receiver pin, so you want to reuse it, SIG, I do sell on the website one replacement spring. I don't know why they put one in the bag, but two in the other bag. Doesn't make sense. But there's the part number 2. Again, available on sigguy.com under the 365 small parts page. So if you do lose that, I mention this because a lot of people, they take apart and put together their FCU, and then they're out at the range, and then the receiver pin falls out, and then pretty soon their gun's falling apart, and they don't understand why it's happening. It's because the spring fell out. They didn't notice it fell out, so that's why I'm kind of going over it now. When you put it back in, I just kind of lay the bottom part in that little groove there, and then kind of roll it up and over. Just make sure it's all the way around that post, basically. And that's how it goes back in. You can kind of see it in the hole there. That's how the notch in the receiver pin, that's what it locks into and keeps it firmly in place. So just keep an eye on that. Now's a good time to do a good thorough cleaning on your 365 if you have not done it or it hasn't done it in a while. Get all that carbon off of there. Light coat of oil on the stuff. Be mindful of where you're taking oil and grease off of. I use grease. I don't really use oil. Everything that moves and reciprocates and rotates, I put a light coat of grease on. Obviously, with the Ramm Tactical parts being brand new, there's no lube on those. So those are going to need lube as well during this reassembly. I'm not going to lube it. This is basically my demo 365 for videos, and I don't want it all nasty and greasy for videos. Makes it a lot easier to do the videos. So we'll kind of, if I remember, we'll touch on it throughout the video. But make sure you do lube yours properly according to your manual and online videos. I got online videos how to clean your 365 as well. So there you go. Clean it all up. We'll come back and we'll start the reassembly. Okay, so what I've done is I've taken everything that's factory that I'm not going to reuse, and I put it into this bag, closed it up. That way we do not get anything mixed up here. I would do that even before opening this package because springs have a way of rolling and stuff, and then you're like, oh, which one's which? You don't know. This is a good way to keep everything separate, okay? Two things I want to mention before I forget. When I talked earlier about pre-travel being removed, that's kind of like a red flag to some people, okay? Because of the 320 and the way the 320 operates. It operates in a similar way, but it doesn't act the same way as the 320. What I mean by that is when we're all done putting this back together, and as Ramm Tactical demonstrates on their video on their webpage, he shakes the pistol once it's all put back together, and what you're hearing is the safety lever flopping back and forth still. Okay, so the safety lever, what happens is when you pull on the trigger more rearward, that safety lever pushes up on our striker safety here, okay, which moves it out of the way. So that way when the sear lets go of the striker, it can hit the primer and make the round go off, okay? If this is not depressed, then there's no way that striker can clear it and hit the primer, okay? So with that pre-travel removed, it's not removed so much that it's starting to override this safety here, okay? So I just wanted to clarify that because a lot of people have issues when it comes to stuff like that, to each their own. So the second thing is you do not need to use any of these springs when you're using this kit. The springs are different because they're a little bit lighter, which reduces the amount of trigger pull weight. Okay, so if you don't want to get that extra added benefit for a lighter trigger, then you can just reuse your striker safety spring, your sear spring, and your trigger bar spring. Okay, you don't have to use the Ramm Tactical springs. So I just wanted to mention that stuff before I forgot, okay? So we have our factory parts over here. What Ramm Tactical gives us is a brand new manual safety lever. This has been modified. So if you have a aftermarket manual safety lever now, like an Armorcraft one or whatnot, you're not going to be able to use that if you want to use the manual safety with this trigger, okay? This has been modified to use with this kit. So you got to use, that's why they include this. I mean, they wouldn't include it if you didn't need it because they could get the price lower and sell more of these things. So I got my manual safety lever there and my detent and my spring in there. This goes in last, so I got it all bagged so it doesn't get lost, okay? They give us a new trigger bar spring, a new trigger, a new sear spring, a new takedown lever, a new end cap, and a new striker safety spring, okay? So we're going to put these guys up here. The first thing we're going to install is our sear and our sear spring. So with our sear spring, Ramm Tactical is kind of added a little longer leg here, okay? And what that does is it just makes the installation a lot easier versus a factory spring, okay? So what I mean by that is when we have this spring installed, its natural resting position, it wants to block the hole here on the bottom for our safety lever pivot pin. So when we go to put our safety lever pivot pin back in, the pin won't go all the way through because it's hitting that spring because the spring wants to be right in the middle of this hole just like that, okay? So with the longer leg, it's a lot easier to get up on the ledge. So the ledge is this guy right here. Okay, see this flat part here? That's made into the side of the FCU there. And basically, these are specially made for me, and the taper on these is perfect for getting a majority of the sear springs, even factory springs, up onto that ledge by simply just pushing this in the hole. It pops that up on the ledge, and then it makes the installation much easier. So Ram Tactical adding the leg takes it one step further. If you have the 365 kit or the deluxe kit, this punch comes in there as well, and it makes this step super easy, okay? As I tell everybody, some of this stuff, it just falls right together. Other times it does not fall together, and it can really frustrate you. And when you're frustrated, it's time to put things down, walk away, cool off a little bit, come back, and give it another go. A lot of times it falls right together the second time. So, pro tip, when you take an armorer's class, they basically tell you to put some grease, a dab of grease on the side of your sear here, and then your sear spring will stick right to it, kind of like that. Then you can kind of take this guy and fish it down into the cavity. The way this guy goes in there is you can see this little leg on the bottom of the sear here. That needs to go. You see this cavity here on the left side, this side over here. There's a notch right in the bottom. The tip of that flat tip is in there. I know it might be hard to see on the lighting. But that little leg goes right in that little notch. It's got to be kind of facing forward to get in that notch. If you're trying to put it in rotated up like this, that means that leg is pointing too far backwards and it's not going to be able to go down in that notch. My easy way of doing this, if you have the deluxe kit or the 320 kit, comes with a sear spring screwdriver, or you can buy just the screwdriver itself. All this stuff's on sigguy.com. I basically grab onto my sear spring just like that with the magnet. And then this is the medium pin alignment tool. This is in the deluxe kit, the 320 kit, the pin alignment kit, and the deluxe kit. The one that we've been using is the 365 pin alignment tool. Okay, so this one's a little bit bigger, but this is the same size as our sear pivot pin. So I'm going to use this to get things lined up. So what I can do is I can just kind of take this guy right here. I'm going to slide it right down in there just like that. I'm going to get those holes lined up, and then I'm going to stick the slave pin in through the back. Okay, because everything's magnetized, it does get a little bit tricky. So you can see I got that slid right down in there just like that. Get my pin alignment kit going in there. I captured the sear with the pin alignment kit. I'm just going to center up that sear spring. And I got my slave pin through there. So this is why I made these toolkits, because it all started with the 320. It's a lot easier to get things lined up with this big handle on there. It gives you leverage and everything and get things pushed where they need to be. And then you just use the factory pin to push out. That's why it's called a slave pin. You just push out that alignment pin in its place, okay? So that's what we're going to do. We're going to pull this out a little bit so I can get my sear spring or a sear pivot pin started. I mean, this is just a little guy, so imagine using just this to get all that stuff lined up. So I got the sear pivot pin started there. Push it right through. Boom. Done. Okay, that's the beauty of these things. I sell a ton of those kits. So I'm going to push that all the way through. And like we mentioned previously, you can see how that spring wants to just live in the center of that bottom hole. Well, if we go to put our safety lever pivot pin in there, we can't get that all the way through there because that spring is blocking that hole. So, because Ramm Tactical made that leg a little bit longer, and then the use of the punch or whatever you got, you can get underneath that spring. You're going to hear it click. Hear that click? Pull the pin back out. You can no longer see that sear spring in the middle of that hole. All right, now that we got our sear in, you can actually give it a little function check. It should rebound by itself because there's tension on that spring now because that leg is sitting up on the shelf like we talked about, okay? So once that's in, we're all set there. This is where things kind of get a little bit different, okay? If you're familiar with any other aftermarket triggers, everything's got to mesh together perfectly. What I mean by that is like the takedown lever here, the nub on this side here, which comes through this side over here. When you're rotating your takedown lever, you can see how that nub kind of fits perfectly flat over there. And then when your trigger's in there, it's not in the way of the trigger and stuff like that. So um, that's one of the issues usually when installing an aftermarket trigger. That part's difficult because things don't mesh quite like they should. With this one here, because so much slop has been taken out of the trigger bar does not rotate down like this, like it normally would when installed with our trigger and our trigger pivot pin and the takedown lever. When that stuff's all in with the factory parts, I can move this trigger bar right down like this. And what that does is it gives me access to these holes here. That bottom hole is the one that the safety lever pivot pin's got to go through. Okay. So it's hard to line up your safety lever. You got to kind of use that hole, but you can't with this kit because everything's so tight. Our trigger bar does not move out of the way. And because of that, our disconnector has to be installed first, okay, before all of this stuff up here is put together, because this does not have much play in it, not enough play in it to get it out of the way, okay? So what we kind of need to do is do things in reverse a little bit. Our safety lever needs to go in first, okay? And I have done this before where the disconnector's definitely got to go in like now before you put the trigger bar on and everything. But when the disconnector's in there, you can't see the hole to line up your safety lever for the pin to go through there. But I have done it to where I look through this side. Typically you want to look through this side because it's much easier. You can see your safety lever, this hole right here, and this leg. You can see that stuff passing the holes as you're putting it inside there. See that? I can see the one hole right there. Kind of push it down. Oops, it's magnetic. Right there. So I got that hole lined up like it's supposed to be. You know, you'd normally put your pin through there and then you're all set. And then at the very end, you put your disconnector in. Well, can't do that with this kit. Okay. And this is the reason why I'm making this video, because it took me a little while to figure this out on my own. I didn't watch any videos prior to this, and it was a little bit more challenging than normal, okay? So we can't do that. That's got to go in there like that with the pin in there, but here's the problem with the pin. If your pin's all the way in there, then you can't get your takedown safety lever bar in there, okay? Because that kind of goes underneath that pin, and that pin holds the end of this bar where it needs to be, okay? That real funky end on it. People call it the shark fin. But the way that thing's designed is it holds this end here. So the order, what I'm getting at here, and I know I'm going on and on and on about this, the order is completely different than typical, okay? So there's several different ways we can do this. We can try putting this in here like we just had it. We'll get that down in there. We're going to line up our hole. So that's lined up. So my slave pin is basically holding my safety lever where it needs to be. You see it flops around on that pin. A lot of times people think they have the pin in there and it's not in there. And they find out at the end when they're to tip it over, the safety lever falls out. So that's why I always check this like that to make sure it's captured by the slave pin. And then we can take our safety lever pivot pin. We'll put that in through here. Shark fin up. If this does not go in easily, if you push down on your sear, then you can get that to slide in. Just like that. Okay, so now that shark fin is capturing our sear pivot pin like it should. You can see that pin is flush with the hole here, flush with the side of our FCU, so that's all the way in. And then again, we can flop this thing around and it works perfectly. Now, this has got to come out, and in some of my previous videos, I showed you how to use your 90-degree pick and basically pull this out till the shark fin was basically flush with the side of our FCU. It's kind of high there. And if it's flush, what that does is it doesn't pull it out far enough to where your safety lever will fall out. Okay? That's about as far as you can go without that safety lever falling out. So if you can get your takedown safety bar in underneath there, during reassembly, then you just push that pin in, you're golden. I mean, this is easy peasy. But what happened to me when I did this the other day is I had to pull that out because some people bend this bar into the takedown lever, into the notch, and I used to do it in the very beginning. I got a couple videos. That's how I used to, one of the most viewed videos for the 365 disassembly and reassembly. That is the method. I don't really like that method anymore. I don't want to bend stuff and make things go in just because. I mean, it started with the trigger bar springs in the 320. You just tweak those a little bit, and then you got a dead trigger. It won't reset. I mean, it's just, I don't like doing things that way. So as long as we got enough room in there to get that in and out, then we're fine. But like I said, I had to pull this out a little bit more, and then my safety lever fell out. Okay. Again, I could look in through this side here, push it down, get it lined up, got my pin in, no problem. That's what we might have to do in this video. So we'll see. Long story short, now is the time that I got to put my disconnector in. Disconnector only goes in one way. Your disconnector has a high hump. This high portion here that goes out because your trigger bar holds this in place. Trigger bar goes like this. Can't fall down because it's captured by our trigger bar. So this slides in there just like that. Okay. And that might be a little bit premature to putting that in there, but now my trigger, on our trigger, we have a over travel screw. It's kind of adjusted set at the factory. When I was doing this, my trigger wouldn't rotate far enough forward to get my trigger bar and everything on, so I basically backed the screw out. They do provide a little Allen wrench to do that, or to adjust it, whatever you need the Allen wrench for. So my Allen wrench is like straight up. I basically rotate this and count the turns. 1, 2, 3, 4 is perfect to where that screw is flush now. It's not sticking out of that hole at all. And there is Loctite on this screw already, so you'll feel a little bit of resistance when you're turning it, which is a good thing. That way it doesn't work its way out. And you can actually put a little, if you got to back this out and you feel more comfortable, you can put a little blue 242 Loctite on there when you run it back in. So like I said, that disconnector, probably a little too early for that, but we'll stick our trigger in here just like this. Okay. Now it can go all the way forward because that pre-travel screw is out. Now I can take my trigger bar spring, or excuse me, my trigger bar, put it on just like that. And now we need to put our disconnector back in. Because like I said, once you put your trigger bar in, there's not enough play to move the trigger bar out of the way to get your disconnector in and out. Okay, so that's done. We're going to come over to this side here. We're going to take our takedown lever. Again, 7 o'clock. And then just kind of fiddle with it until you can see like this notch here in the middle. It's machined like as wide as this is. Okay, so when we put this in there at 7 o'clock and we rotate it, because you can rotate this and have it out, like not in far enough, like that. That's not in far enough. You can see it's sticking out way too far over here, but it's rotated in there. It's kind of locked in there, but you can see that little nub is not flush with the side of our FCU. So basically rotate it to the 7 o'clock, push it in a little bit more, and then rotate it. And now it's in its proper position. You can see on this side here, You can see that little nub that's rotating. That's part of the takedown lever. That is perfectly flush with the side of our FCU here. So we know we're in the proper depth. And now we can take our trigger pivot pin and put this guy in. Okay. Make sure it goes all the way in. That should be flush as well. Okay. If it's not going in all the way, kind of move your trigger side to side because it needs to line up on the other hole on the side of the trigger there and through the FCU to get it to go in all the way. So that part's all put back together. It is a little bit different, like I said, from the normal way of putting this stuff together. So let's continue on with the rest. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to install my trigger bar spring. It'll keep that from moving around and unintentionally falling apart. So we don't have to start all over. So your trigger bar spring goes through that cavity in one leg. You can see it hooked on there, that little notch. And then what I do is I use the palm of my hand here, right here, against the trigger to hold it forward. That will keep the trigger bar towards the rear as much as possible. As I'm using my pick on that leg to get it up and over the back of the trigger bar there. And keep in mind it is a new spring, so it might be a little bit stiff. And you can see it's not quite, it's behind the trigger bar there, but it's not in the hole. It's got to go towards the left. So what I do is I kind of put my finger over that, and I use my pick, and I just pull the loop of the spring to the left, and that'll make that spring drop right into our trigger ball hole, okay? Give it a little functions check. So that's all together. That's not going to fall out. Now we're going to do our takedown safety. Actually, let's do our slide catch before we forget and we get too much stuff in there. So this spring goes in there just like that. The little leg points down. The long leg is up. That's what actually is a notch right here in our slide catch. So that little spring is going to go just like that in that notch, and it's going to keep this from falling out. The front part of this, the little circle, that goes right in here. This circle portion right here. Okay, and it just kind of hinges in there. That little spring is all that keeps that against the FCU and from falling out. So we got to put our spring in first. So we're going to put it in there with a little leg in this little groove. And there's a little notch in that groove that'll capture that spring. I'm going to hold it in there with my finger, and I'm just going to kind of rotate this up and against the side of the FCU just like that. Okay. So that little leg is in the notch there. That's not going to come out. This little, the longer leg is up over this stuff right here. And it's resting firmly against this lower portion right in here, okay? It's got to be right against there. So now our slide catch goes underneath the spring, okay? So some people, really good suggestion, they took like a piece of floss or a string and they ran it in through here, brought it in through the outside, basically pulled that spring up, tied it, okay? So your spring is basically being held just like that, which makes it easy to get the slide catch underneath it, which was an ingenious idea. I've done it before. It works great. I can kind of just get my pick in there, hold that up, stab this point here underneath the spring, and get it in there just like that. So that's the way I'm going to do it here. I'm going to get my spring up Stab it just like that. Didn't go underneath. Just like that. Get the other end in that little hole. And then if you look on the back side, you can see right here, spring. If you can't see the spring on top of that little, the arrow there, that portion that from the takedown or the slide catch that we stabbed underneath the spring. If you can't see that spring resting on top of there, that means the spring's underneath there, and you're going to have issues installing your slide, and my takedown lever won't rotate and all kinds of stuff like that. So basically, you can hold it with your finger and just kind of do a little function check. It should flop back down by itself. That way I know the spring's on top of it and it's installed correctly. All right, so we're on the home stretch, and I know this is a lengthy video already, but I firmly believe it is better to be more thorough than not thorough enough, because I've watched videos before on other stuff and just having zero clue on how that step got completed because the person just didn't show it correctly. Like on CZs and stuff like that, when I was messing around with that kind of stuff. I mean, it's just really poor videos. And I don't want you guys to be stranded wondering the same thing. So I'd rather be more thorough. You can always fast forward if you get that step. So now what we need to do is install our takedown safety bar, okay? And this little leg here goes in a notch on our takedown lever. So this is our factory one. I took it out of the bag here to show the notch here underneath. Okay, so this little notch here. That is what that little leg goes in, just like that. Okay? And then when you rotate your takedown lever, it moves this bar back and forth. Okay? So some people, and I have in the past, like I said, I put this end in first. Then that little leg is kind of sitting over there. And that little leg has to get above this little nub here, because it rests right on top of that nub. Okay, it keeps it from falling down. So that sticks out from the side of the FCU. So when this is in the proper position, you got to kind of bend it up and over that nub to get it into position. I try not to do that anymore, okay? Because I'd rather stick this side in here. Put your lever at like 4 o'clock. You can see that notch that the end of the bar goes in. I'd rather put that in there just like that, and then find a way to put this end in there. That way you're not bending anything. So you'll see it almost wants to go in there just like it is, okay? But the problem is this little nub on the top that doesn't want to clear underneath our pin, okay? It's just like, it just needs a micro millimeter more and it'll drop right in there. So what I do is I'll take a pair of needle nose and I'll rotate that as much as I can. It won't go very far because the shark fin part hits the side of the FCU, but it gives you just a little bit of a room in there. And with any luck, you can get this to drop down in there. Now, when we're getting this in there, this is going to be hard to see. Get a little flashlight here. So in behind here, you're going to, right in here, you're going to see a silver leg. That's my sear. Okay. See that little leg? Right below that safety lever pivot pin, the shark fin there. Right below it. Right in this cavity right here. Can't see without the flashlight in there. That's the sear. So this leg here, it needs to go behind the sear. Because what it does is it pulls that sear. Okay. If it goes in front of that sear, now remember, when this is all installed, when we're rotating our takedown lever, this pulls forward when we're rotating this down, and it presses back when we're rotating that up. So what happens is, this is in this position, right, when we're putting our slide back on. So people put their slide back on. If this is in the wrong position, it's in front of that sear. That sear does not rotate anymore. That leg poking down there does not go back anymore. It's designed to go forward. So what happens is this leg gets in front of that sear, and then they can't rotate their takedown lever. They're like, no matter what I do, I can't push it. It won't rotate, so they can finish the reassembly of their slide to their lower. It's because this nub right here is in front of the sear leg instead of behind the sear leg, okay? So when we put this inside this cavity here, you're going to feel it like not want to go in all the way. It's because it's probably on top of that sear leg. So what you do is you just take your finger here, you push down on your sear, it'll rotate that leg more forward. This will drop right down into place, and then you're good to go, okay? So let's try this. This here is about 4 o'clock. I can see that little notch underneath. That ends in there. You can see it's just about above that notch there that we have to get over. That's in there, that's in there. I'm going to push my sear forward. See if I can get this in there. Just not enough room in there. My pin slid in because I hit the side of it. So I'm working it out just a little bit. This is the easy way if you can get it to go in. Just like that. So this has got to be flush with the side here, okay? It's flush all the way down. Okay, I can see I'm in the notch there. So basically, the way this interacts with your slide catch is you have a nub here on your slide catch, and you have a nub here on your takedown safety bar. Okay, when you try to rotate this, it's not going to rotate because these two nubs are colliding. They're hitting like this. Actually, like this. So you got to lift up on your slide catch so your takedown safety lever, the bar there, can go by it. Okay, and that'll. So what you gotta hold this stuff together so it doesn't fall apart. But see, when I lift up on my slide catch, see, it just popped in, it went by it, and now it goes down. Okay. I'm gonna do this another way too. So for those people that aren't successful this way, again, I don't leave you stranded. So I just push that all the way in. I'm gonna check to make sure my safety lever still slides back and forth, which it does. It's still captured by my pivot pin. So that's before, when I did this, this didn't work. I had to actually pull this pin out to get this put back together because, like I said, I do not want to bend anything. That's not what they teach you in an armor's class. And as a mechanic, you just don't bend things to get them into position. There's other ways to do that. That's not how the manufacturer does it, so that's not the way I want to show you guys how to do it. So what I'll do now is I'll pull this pin out. That way, if you're having a hard time doing it like I just did it, there's an easier way to get this all together. Then the challenge is just getting that safety lever, the hole in that, lined up with the pin. But I'll show you how to do that next. All right, so I'm back at the point where we were getting ready to put in our bar. And rather than trying to sneak it underneath here, I'm just going to pull that baby out, okay? We're just going to pull that right out. We'll get our safety lever out of there, and we'll worry about that after, okay? So now you can see it's much easier. 4 o'clock on our lever. Get the end of our bar right in that notch, okay? Get that right up around, put it right into place. And now you can kind of, if you look down at this, Yeah, you can see it this way pretty good. See how this is kind of bent out? It's not in all the way because, like I said, it's hitting our sear. Okay, so if you ever run your finger along there and you can feel that this is not all the way in there, just push down on your sear, and you'll see that goes right in. Because every now and then when you're putting stuff together, it wants to pop out like that, and then you don't notice it until you go to put this in your grip module, and it won't fit because now it's too wide. And you're like, why won't it fit? Well, you just push down on the sear, pop that right back in there, just like that. Okay. So now that we have that all like it needs to be, this is all nice and flush. Okay. That's all like it needs to be. This is all in there nice and flush. Now we have to put our pin back in and our safety lever. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll take our safety lever and we'll start it in the notch here. And what I kind of do is just visualize. I'm looking at where this hole is and I'm watching it go into the FCU. Okay. And this ultimately needs to go. Remember, this is kind of flat with the top of our FCU. Okay. It's not pointed up like this. It's not pointed down like that. It's kind of relatively flat as we slide that in there because this part here needs to go, this leg here needs to go in the proper position. If it's not aiming the right way, it's not going to go in the right position, okay? See how that popped out again? It always wants to pop out. So I'm visualizing that going down inside the hole. And if you have like somebody with you, you can always take a flashlight, have them hold it, or the headlight flashlights. You can shine it right down in that hole. I can see everything that's going on, just like the other side. Kind of slide that in there like that. I don't know if it's exact yet, but I'll take my little punch here. I'll kind of stab that in there. And then I'll flip this back and forth. Yeah, it's pivoting on that punch. Turn it upside down. If it falls out, you're not captured. So I know my punch is like right through it. So what I'll do is I wobble this like that, and that's going to kind of center that safety lever in the hole, hopefully. And very carefully without rotating this, so that pin slides. Shark fin up. Don't forget our sear needs to be pushed in a little bit and make that pin go. Look at that, it just fell in. The sear hits that pin, okay? So you push down on your sear. As you're pushing that in, it should slide all the way through like it just did. That's captured like it should be. Double check it just like that. So that's probably the easier way, I guess. I don't know. Both ways work for me. I'll try this way first before that way, I guess. That might have looked a lot easier because I've done this a million times. It might be a little bit more difficult for your first time. Again, there's two different options, so whatever you think works for you. And as always, I recommend, and I should have said this in the very beginning of the movie, or the video. I know it's about movie length by now. Watch the video all the way through before doing anything. That way you know exactly what to expect. There's no surprises. Things ain't falling out. Yeah, should have said that in the very beginning. But so there you have it. That is everything all put back together. Next and last for the FCU, all we need to do is install our manual safety lever. All right, so our manual safety lever, like we mentioned previously, there's like this cross member here. There's a little nub right here. It needs to go underneath that. So the barrel, if we're looking underneath, goes towards the left. That's where our detent and spring go in. We're not going to put that in yet, though, because we won't lose it. But that's on the left. This is underneath it, looking from the bottom to the top. So we're going to take that little nub there, and we're going to get it so it's going underneath that cross member like we just talked about. If we pull our trigger, it leaves, makes a little bit more room in there for us to rotate this. And don't forget, this goes side to side as well, which prevents it from turning and it allows it to turn. So make sure you're in the proper position, okay, as far as in and out. And then you can get that to rotate all the way just like that, okay? So once we're rotated all the way like that, we know we're in far enough. We're going to hold this that way, okay? I'm going to take our spring, put it in our little hole. And then our detent, we're going to stick that in the hole too. It only goes one way. There's a little nub on one end that goes inside the spring, or the spring goes around it, okay? And then the other end kind of looks like a flat tip screwdriver. See that? See how it's got like a real sharp edge? That needs to be going that way, straight across this way, not this way. Okay, because that rides in the detent there, and that makes a nice crisp. So when you're getting ready to finalize this, make sure your detent, the whole lever is towards that way enough to where this detent is, you know, on top of this part here. If it's sticking way out here, your lever's too far this way. It might not even rotate, but there's nothing for the detent to interact with. It's got to go inside here, these two notches. So we got the blade going like this. I basically just push that in with my finger, rotate the lever with my thumb, and then you hear it click into place. You can see it's in the first notch there, second notch. There you go. We're good to go. So manual safety's all in and everything. The last thing we're going to do is put our pre-travel screw back to the where it was initially, which was 4 turns. Screw that in 4 turns. 1, 2, 3, 4. And you should feel resistance because that Loctite, like I said, if it turns really easy, you might want to take the screw out, clean it off, put some more Loctite on it, and then run it back in. Okay? But that is how to completely assemble all the Ramm tactical parts back into the FCU. There's only one other step, and that's to do the striker safety in the slide portion. All right, so the last part is our striker safety spring, and you do not have to use this spring if you don't want to. It's going to reduce your trigger pull weight a little bit in combination with the other springs in the kit. But you do have to use the end cap, okay? So there's other aftermarket companies out there also that have triggers, and people have a hard time reinstalling their slide, okay? And the reason being is because on these aftermarket triggers, the pre-travel's removed, which means our trigger is pushed back a little bit, which raises up our safety lever right here, the one that flops around that we just installed last, okay? That's normally facing straight forward like this, and the slide can go right over it. But because the trigger's pulled a little bit, now it's slightly up, and now that the slide wants to collide with it. Where it hits is the back plate. So Ramm Tactical has included a new back plate with a slightly bigger notch on this side, which clears that safety lever that is pointed up a little bit, okay? So we need to remove our slide cap because we got to replace it with this one anyway, and then we got to remove our striker and take out our striker safety to replace the spring, okay? So this newer design striker housing is a little bit more difficult than the previous versions to remove. The previous versions, and if you have an older one, you just pull it forward and the cap comes off. Well, that was leading to problems where caps are falling off while people are firing their 365s. So they got redesigned to where it's more difficult to let go of the slide cap. So what we need to do now is that same housing there, You can see mine's facing in a little bit. That housing there, this little nub, it needs to be pushed in towards the center and then forward, so that way it's releasing the slide cap and we can slide the slide cap up and out of there. The problem with that was people were really destroying the housing there. The plastic, it's only plastic. So from doing this several times or maybe one time, they just chewed up that plastic. And the only way you could fix it was buy a whole new striker back in the day. Well, about a year or so ago, SIG has finally released just the housing itself. So if you do booger up that end, this end right here, you can get just the housing and replace the housing. So here's the part number. These are available again on sigguy.com under 365 small parts page. Okay, sigguy.com. And you can replace that if you booger it up. Or I made a kit here that makes this easy peasy. Don't damage anything. These are 3D printed from carbon fiber PLA. So it's softer where it's not going to damage the stuff, okay? But it's strong enough to do what we need to do. So because we need to push that in quite a bit, that's what the bigger, thicker wedge is for. You can see how it's tapered on one side. That goes towards the inside. And what we're going to do is we're going to put it right down on the side of that housing there, the nub. You can see how it has moved it in towards the center. We're going to take our other wedge, the longer one, and it's angled on both sides so they can go either way. We're going to put that in behind the nub, in between the cap and that nub. That needs to be pushed forward. As we push that down in there, it's pushing that nub forward. I'm going to take out this other one. We don't need that in there anymore. And we can just slide our cap up and out of there. Didn't damage anything. This is spring loaded. You heard it click as it was releasing. Okay. So this has been used for a long time. Mine's a little boogered up, but it still works fine. I should have probably put a new one in this for this video, but it will not damage that cap at all doing it this way, and then reassembly is just as easy. So I've sold a lot of these kits and people just absolutely love this here. So I've been doing this for about 13 years now, so the stuff's kind of easy to me, but I encourage all people to kind of do this stuff, and a lot of them are beginners, and I don't want to see people struggle and stuff, and I don't want people damaging stuff, and it kind of comes back on me as I encourage them to do this and they ruin their stuff. So with the right tools, any job is easy as long as you have the right tools. So that is perfect for this removal process. So now that we have our cap off, that's still got to come out. And then what we're going to do is we're going to push down on this striker safety, spring loaded like I said. We're going to pull our striker all the way out. Okay, don't let go of this yet because it's spring loaded. We're going to let that go real slowly. And just flop it right over. We pull the factory spring out and the striker safety. And we're going to take this factory spring and we're going to put that right in the bag before that gets mixed up with our Ramm tactical one. I'm going to put that aside. This is the Ramm tactical one, our end cap, and our safety lever. So our striker safety. If you need replacements of any of this stuff, like I said, I have all this stuff on sigguy.com. Here's a new striker safety and a new factory spring. Okay, 2-piece kit. There's our part number under the 365 small parts. And then that safety lever, the one that goes back and forth, and the pin that holds it, that shark fin looking pin there. This is another kit. 2-piece kit. There's our part number. Again, available on sigguy.com. And I have the trigger bars. And I'll show you that after. Trigger bars and the takedown safety bar. Got all this stuff. People lose stuff, so I like to be able to have it so they can get it quickly. Okay. So when we put this back together, this is going to be bone dry, no lube or anything like that. We're going to take the Ramm tactical spring. We're going to put it on there just like that. Spring facing up. Slide facing just like this. That's the forward. Okay. We want the spring towards the outside. We're going to feed it right into this hole here. And just be careful that the spring doesn't kind of catch the top of the hole and knock it out of alignment, because in the bottom of the hole, You can see on like the 3 o'clock position, there's a machined little circle out of there. That's where the spring goes in. Okay. You'll know if it's wrong. If it's wrong, it's wrong. If it's right, it's right. There's no kind of in between there. So you can see I kind of hit it there a little bit. So I'm doing like a little function check. I can feel it rebounding back. It's a lot lighter than the OEM one. And then you can look down inside here, perfectly circle, and you can see it actually moving on the side there. See it? If it's wrong, it's kind of usually pointed in. The springs, you can see the spring and everything. You'll know it's definitely not in there correctly. So just make sure we're in the proper position. We'll take our striker, we'll put that back in there, and that'll kind of capture that. See a little leg on the striker, how it goes over there, and it won't allow that to come flying out of there. So now we need to reinstall our Ramm Tactical end cap. So what we need to do is kind of push our striker in. We need to kind of pull that tab over, and this is the way you typically had to do it. See my fingers like turning white because I'm pressing so hard. A lot of people don't have this hand strength. Mine's actually not as good as it used to be. So that's why I made this piece here. It's kind of like, I call it a pusher, I think, on the website. It's kind of molded to where that housing goes right in that notch underneath, just like that. Now it's a lot easier to push on with my finger. So I push it in as far as I can go. I'm going to take the little housing there, the little nub there, whatever. I'm going to pull it in, and then it's going to push in a little bit more. See that? And then you can even actually push in on the striker safety, make sure we're all the way bottomed out. And then you'll notice this notch that's kind of printed into that pusher. That's made it such a way to where your cap can fit right in there. Just like that. See how the cap kind of fit right down into that there? And if I hold the cap, I can actually let go of the pusher. The cap's kind of retaining the striker. I can pull this out, push my cap up in there. And then you should hear it click on a brand new housing and everything, because mine's a little bit boogered up there. You're going to make sure, regardless if it's new or not, see how mine's kind of in the center still? We're going to make sure you can even actually use that wedge there if you don't want to. This actually works a lot better. The thicker one there with the angled piece towards that. You need to make sure it's all the way that way. Okay? So that way the striker, when it comes back, there's enough room. If that's in towards there, the striker's not going to be able to go back enough. And then your cap's not locked in all the way. Okay? So that's how we replace the striker safety spring using the tools available on sigguy.com. Next, we'll just reassemble this and we'll evaluate how the trigger feels. All right, for you California guys, some of these aftermarket triggers, not this one. The Ramm Tactical's got it all set because he includes, stuff that it needs to make it work. But some of the other ones do not. And what I mean by that is your California trigger pivot pin is shorter than this, and it's like your detent, how it's got that little post that goes inside the spring. Well, there's a little post on the end of your trigger, or your trigger pivot pin, that goes into the hole on the trigger, okay? So sometimes you need a factory, a non-California trigger pivot pin. So I do have those available as well on sigguy.com. This is the part number. I don't have the California ones yet. They're not available yet. So as soon as they are available, if you need to replace your trigger pivot pin and you have a California model, I can take care of that. The trigger bar, if you need a new trigger bar, here's your part number. Okay. These are all SIG factory. SIG ran out of black bags, and they did these white bags for a while. They're obnoxious, and I hate them, but it is what it is. And then here's the takedown safety. That's your takedown safety, the bar, and it comes with that shark pin as well. I know it's hard to see through the glare, but there's 2 pieces in there. Okay, so that's the factory stuff. There's your part number if I didn't show you. It's on sigguy.com, 365 small parts page. So now all we have left is to reassemble everything. And then this is my demo one that I do not have a manual safety. I don't use a manual safety usually. So the grip that it was in doesn't have the notch. Okay. So if you do not have a notch and you need to make a notch in your polymer X Macro grips, other than the Sig Factory X Macro grip, because those are a lot thicker. So your Wilson Combat ones, and then your regular Sig Sauer 365 grip modules, non-X Macro. These are really thick in here, okay? So you can't modify this one. You can, but it's a very extensive process. You got to take off a lot of the wall here to make your lever freely float, okay? But a regular 365 Sig grip module, a Wilson Combat grip module, if it's a non-manual safety, you can convert it very easily using, it's called a 365 multifunction tool, okay? It comes with the razor blade, emery board, the jig, this piece here, which has pilot holes for the drill bit. Everything's included in this kit to put a notch in your grip, and this is the grip I actually used for that video. This did not have a notch in it originally, okay? So we'll get that receiver pin out of there. You can see this is like a simulated FCU. You can basically put this in here. You can put a slide on here if you don't have a spare FCU to hold this stuff together. And you can kind of put this on a pistol stand. If I sell pistol stands as well. And it kind of keeps it in your safe so things not getting scratched and it's not like a pile of parts and everything in there. Anyway, so this is the jig. Okay, it just slides right on here. Clicks into place. Here's your pilot holes on each side. You drill them out, and then you can make the safety notch. Okay? So we'll put this down in here. Make sure everything is pressed in there all the way. Why is that? There. It's weird how that went in there, but make sure everything is nice and free floating. You don't want it jammed in there. You make sure your bars are sandwiched against your FCU like they should, not sticking out, making it a press fit. Because if you got to press it in there, something's not right. And we'll take our receiver pin. This is a brand new grip, so everything's stiff on it. Push our pin in. Everything's fine there. Make sure your barrel's centered. So this is what I was talking about. That safety lever is slightly lifted up. And with the notch in the Ramm tactical cap, it'll go over that no problem. Safe direction. Basically, you want to do a functions check. Everything works fine. That's that safety lever rattling back and forth. And what that's telling me is it's not pushing up on that safety lever, the striker safety, overriding that striker safety. There's still free play in there. So this trigger isn't pulled back far enough to actually start to override that safety. So you're not compromising any safeties, okay? And then if you go on my website, sigguy.com, under the Ramm Tactical page, don't go to the product page. You got to go to the Ramm Tactical page. And the very first thing up top, it has the trigger scan data that compares the Ramm Tactical trigger to the Sig Sauer factory trigger. And what that graph is showing you is the lines going this way is the amount of distance the trigger travels, and the higher them lines go, that's the trigger pull weight. Okay, and what you can see is the Ramm Tactical curve during the trigger pull is way left of the Sig Sauer one. That means there's a lot less trigger travel, and then it's also lower, which means there's less trigger pull weight. You can't argue with the numbers; it's all on there. The trigger scan is a highly sophisticated triggers tool that graphs every aspect of a trigger pull. So that's on there. It's very interesting. That's the reason why I'm decided to put this product on my website, because you cannot argue with those results. The trigger is phenomenal. Ramm Tactical, I mean, hit it out of the park with this one. This is what everybody wants in a trigger pull for the 365. Everybody's like, hey, what's out there? I get these emails all the time. And you're limited to what you can do. There's some stuff that improve it, but it was still not a very desirable trigger. Well, this here is night and day. So there's the reset. I'll let off. You can see there's like almost no pre-travel. Still some there. It's not completely all gone, but it's way less than it was from the factory. Okay. And then what you'd want to do is your over travel screw, kind of run that in, and it's all personal preference. And I wouldn't get crazy with the pre-travel screw if this is an EDC, okay? Because you don't ever want something preventing the trigger from being pulled back far enough to fire the weapon, okay? But a range gun, a recreational gun, competition gun, fun gun, anything but EDC or a home defense, you can run that pre-travel, and this is the same with all triggers that are adjustable out there, okay? You can run that in there and then cycle your slide, pull the trigger until it stops going off. Once that screws in far enough and it doesn't go off anymore, then you start backing it out a little at a time until it works perfectly, and that'll remove a lot of that over travel. Over travel, it's pretty good right from the factory. Like I said, that screw is exactly like it came in the package, and they pretty much nailed it. But if you're seeing that yours is not firing, it might be because your tolerances are a little bit different, and you just got to back that screw out a little bit. But, all right, that's how you install the Ramm Tactical leverage trigger. There's one other product I want to mention really quick, and that's the takedown lever assist that I made. And some people do have a hard time rotating these takedown levers, believe it or not. There's the internet tough guys that say, hey, if you need that tool, you should probably get a different gun. But for every one of those wise asses out there, there's hundreds of people that email me thanking me for making this because they have a hard time rotating their takedown lever. Disabilities, elderly, weak hand strength, whatever. This makes it so much easier. So we're going to rotate lock our slide to the rear. These are specific to the pistol. So 365 SIG takedown lever, 365 SIG. I make the 365 Armory Craft, 320 Go Guns, 320 Armory Craft, 320 SIG, 22X, you name it. I got pretty much all of them out there. So this fits perfectly over that, just like that. The handle gives you some leverage to rotate it just like that. Easy peasy. You can remove your slide. So again, popular on the website, sigguy.com, under the tools. Sold a ton of those. And like whatever I can do to help people out, make things easier, that's what I love doing. So I'll end this video. As always, thank you for watching. If you find this type of content useful, there'll be a subscribe button right down here in the corner. If you could subscribe to the channel, I would greatly appreciate it. As always, thank you for watching and have a great day.